Hey guys, I'm actually filming this on my phone this time. The last two readings that I did, I recorded on my iPad, and I had several messages that told me that they could barely hear me and that they had to plug in headphones to listen to me. So I thought I would try it with my phone, and we will see if the volume is any better. Okay, where we had left off, for those of you, that are just following us or just starting, you'll need to watch the previous two videos to be able to be up to where we're at. We are on chapter 5 in the book Hachiko Waits by Leslea Newman. This is an amazing book, true story that happened in Japan. It is obviously, it's about a professor, and it's about an Akita who was his loyal companion for years. And where we left off in the story, the professor every single day, Hachi would walk with him to the train station, and then when the train would bring the professor home from work at 3 o'clock, Hachi would be there to walk home with him. Well, in this particular instance where it left off, Hachi was there at 3 o'clock and then his master did not get off the train. So we're going to see what happens. Chapter 5. The next morning, Yasuo and his mother arrived at the train station a little before 9 o'clock. The day was unusually warm and humid. It felt more like July than May. The air on the platform was heavy and still, and Mrs. Takahashi untucked a white silk fan decorated with pink flowers from her obi and waved it lightly in front of her face. "Where are the professor and Hachi?" Yasuo asked his mother. "I do not know," she said, searching the platform. Mrs. Takahashi's eyes swept over a sea of colorful kimonos in search of the professor's dark brown business suit. "Maybe the professor is away, or maybe he is ill." Mrs. Takahashi looked around once more. "I am sure he will be here tomorrow. Come, Yasuo, here is the train." That afternoon, Professor Ueno was not on the train that Yasuo and his mother rode back to Shibuya. I know I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Shibuya, maybe? Station. And he was not on the platform when they stepped off the train. But Hachi was there, sitting in his usual spot, alert and waiting. "This is most unusual. Now I am worried," said Yasuo's mother. "Let us wait for the next train." Mrs. Takahashi and Yasuo walked over to a wooden bench and sat down. It wasn't long before the next train pulled into the station and discharged its passengers. Yasuo and Mrs. Takahashi watched as a crowd of people hurried by, a woman carrying a furoshiki and leading a small child by the hand, high school boys in their navy blue school uniforms with gold buttons marching up the front of their jackets, and young girls with full serge skirts tied over their bright kimonos. Hachi sat where he was, sniffing the air, his eyes scanning the faces of the many people around him. Yasuo and his mother searched the crowd as well, but they did not see the professor. They sat on the bench while two more trains pulled into the station. Many people departed from the trains and hurried past Hachi to get out of the station, but Professor Ueno was not one of them. "Come, Yasuo," Mrs. Takahashi stood up. "Let us speak to the station master. Perhaps he knows something Perhaps he knows what has happened." Yasuo's mother bowed to Mr. Yoshikawa. "We are curious about Professor Ueno," she said. "He was not on the train today." "A terrible thing has happened." Mr. Yoshikawa removed his hat and spoke in a hushed voice. "Professor Ueno took ill while he was at the university yesterday. His heart stopped beating. Another professor who worked with him came to my office and told me." Yasuo's mother knelt down and took her son's hand. "Yasuo, the professor has died," she said in a small, gentle voice. "But why?" Yasuo asked. "He was not old." "No one knows why it happened," said the station master. "We will never see the professor again," Yasuo whispered, and he stood quietly beside his mother. His chin trembled and his eyes grew moist. He would miss seeing Professor Ueno every day. And what would become of Hachi? Yasuo turned to the dog waiting patiently on the platform amid a steady stream of commuters. Tears spilled down Yasuo's cheeks. "But what about—" Yasuo's words were caught in his throat. "I do not know what to do," said Mr. Yoshikawa, looking at the dog. "Hachi arrived just before 3 o'clock, as he always does. He does not know his master will never return." Here's a beautiful illustration of Yasuo comforting Hachi. You can even see just in the expression of the boy and the dog. Beautiful. Very sad, but beautiful. An idea took shape in Yasuo's mind. "Oki-san," he said, looking up at his mother. "May we take Hachi home with us, please?" "I am sure he will not be any trouble," the station master said. "He is very smart and well behaved. I have never heard him growl, and until yesterday I'd never heard him bark." "I must think about it," said Mrs. Takahashi. She looked over at Hachi as he sat perfectly still among the mass of people swirling around him. And just at that moment he glanced over his shoulder and looked at her. Then his somber gaze returned to the train tracks. "Please, Oki-san," Yasuo said. "I will take good care of him, I promise." Yasuo held his breath as his mother thought. I will do it for the professor, she said at last. He was a very kind man. Arigato, Oki-san, Yasuo said with a bow. Then he went over to the doorway. Here, Hachi, he called, slapping his thighs, but the dog did not move. Yasuo ran out of the platform. You are coming home with Oki-san and me, he told the Akita-kun. Hachi stared up at Yasuo, but at the sound of an approaching train, he fixed his eyes upon the tracks. Yasuo stepped up right beside him and then began walking away. Hachi, heel! Yasuo spoke in the turned voice he had heard the professor use when giving the dog a command. Hachi, heel! He said again, but Hachi would not obey him. I will get you something to lead him with, said Mr. Yoshikawa. He disappeared into his office for a minute and then returned with a long piece of rope. He tied one end around Hachi's neck and handed the other end to Yasuo. Come, Hachi, Yasuo said. We are going home. He pulled at the rope, but Hachi would not budge. He is stronger than I am. Oki-san, you must help me. Yasuo and his mother tugged on the rope. Hachi stood his ground. The station master gave them a hand, and at last, with great reluctance, Hachi began to move. He is not happy, Yasuo said as they led Hachi out of the station and down the steps. He will get used to this, Yasuo's mother said as they half pulled, half dragged Hachi away. Chapter 6. When Yasuo and his mother got home, they took off their shoes and brought Hachi inside. Yasuo put a bowl of fresh water down on the floor in front of the entryway. What will he eat? Yasuo asked his mother. He will eat what we eat, she said. Rice and fish and vegetables. We do not have money to buy special food for him. Come inside, Hachi, Yasuo called, but the dog was not interested in leaving the Genkan to explore the rest of Yasuo's house. He sat in front of the door and stared at it. He does not like it here, Yasuo said sadly. He needs time to get used to his new life, said Mrs. Takahashi. Yasuo knelt down next to Hachi and stroked the fur on his back. He spoke to him in a calm, soothing voice. I know you miss the professor, he said. At the word professor, Hachi's ears swiveled back. I miss him too. But you will like living with us, Hachi. I will give you bits of fish and meat and other good things to eat, and I will play with you. We will have fun together. Yasuo offered his hand to Hachi, hoping he would lick it, but the dog just stayed where he was, staring at the door. Poor Hachi, Yasuo said. You are hoping that the door will open and the professor will walk through it. I would like that to happen too, but it is not possible. Yasuo shook his head sadly. If only he knew a way to make the Akita-kun understand his words. Yasuo spoke to the dog a little while longer, then fell silent and sat quietly beside him, hoping his presence would bring the dog comfort. Yasuo, Mrs. Takahashi called to her son, it is time to start your homework. Yasuo brought his school books into the front entryway to be near Hachi. He opened a book and began to practice his reading. A short time later, he heard footsteps outside the front door. It was his father coming home from work. Ota-san, please do not come in yet, Yasuo called through the door. We have a surprise for you. Then he called to his mother. Oka-san, please, come help me with Hachi. Yasuo's mother came to the Genkan, and together she and Yasuo held on to Hachi so he would not run away. You may come in now, Ota-san, Yasuo said. But please slide the door quickly open and then slide it shut tight behind you. Hello, who is this? Yasuo's father asked upon seeing the big golden brown dog. This is Hachi, Yasuo said. He is Professor Ueno's dog. And where is the professor? Asked Mr. Takahashi as he stepped out of his work shoes and into his cloth house slippers. Mrs. Takahashi motioned to her husband to follow her into the next room. A few minutes later, Yasuo's father came back to speak to his son. I hear that Hachi is going to live with us, he said to Yasuo. You know that taking care of a dog is a big responsibility. Yes, Oti-san. Do you feel that you are ready to take on such a big responsibility? Yes, Oti-san, Yasuo said again. He is a young dog, Mr. Takahashi said, indicating at the back of Hachi's head. He will live for many years, Yasuo. It will be your duty to take care of him for a long time, even on the days that you would prefer to do something else. I understand, Ota-san. Mr. Takahashi squatted down and patted the dog on the head. Hello, Hachi, he said softly. Then he turned to Yasuo. He is very beautiful. He is an Akita-kun, Yasuo said. I have heard of the Akita, said Yasuo's father. They are very brave and very smart. We will take him for a walk after we eat. Now go inside and change out of your uniform, Yasuo. I will put on a kimono and then we will have supper. When the evening meal was ready, Yasuo and his father went into the tatami room. They sat down on cushions in front of a low dining table next to the small alcove. In the alcove was a tall black lacquer vase holding a pair of purple irises that Yasuo's mother had taken great care to arrange in a pleasing manner. Mrs. Takahashi brought in 3 bowls of clear soup, 3 bowls of rice, and 3 plates of tempura, and then sat down with her family to eat. Yasuo used his chopsticks to pick up the pieces of tofu and vegetables floating in his soup, and then lifted the liqueur bowl up to his lips and drank the hot, clear broth. Next, he turned to the tempura. Here's an illustration. Remember I told you in Japan that the customs there are very different. This was in the early 1900s. I'm sure they've changed since then, but a lot of them are very similar. They still do eat on these little low-rising tables. I guess you call them tables. And you can see Hachi watching them, and they're eating at their table, and they're watching Hachi, and I don't know if you can tell, he just has a very forlorn look on his face. Very sad. He misses his master, the professor. The pieces of batter-dipped fried shrimp and vegetables were balanced in a perfect circle on Yasuo's plate. He ate a few pieces along with some rice and then tried to coax Hachi away from the door with what remained on his dish. Here, Hachi, Yasuo said, offering the dog a few bits of shrimp. Try some of this, but Hachi did not even turn his head to sniff at the food. He would not even take a sip of water. He just stayed where he was in front of the door with his back to Yasuo's family. May we take Hachi for a walk now? Yasuo asked as soon as his father put down his chopsticks. Maybe that will make him feel better. Mr. Takahashi took a last sip of tea and rose from his cushion. We will feed him when we return. Come. Yasuo's father put on one end of the rope around Hachi's neck and held the other end tightly as he slid open the door, but he was not prepared for Hachi's great strength. As soon as the door was open, Hachi burst out of the house, yanking the end of the rope right out of Mr. Takahashi's hand. Hachi, come back! Yasuo cried, but the dog raced away. Yasuo and his father dashed up the street, but they were no match for Hachi, who ran faster than the wind. Mr. Takahashi turned to his son. I am very sorry, Yasuo. It is not your fault, Oti-san. Hachi did not want to live with us. We are not his family. Yasuo's father put his arm around his son's shoulders. Akitas are very intelligent. They were bred to be hunting dogs. I have heard that an Akita can even bring down a bear. Do not worry, Yasuo. Hachi will take care of himself. But what is there to hunt in Shibayu? Yasuo asked, and his father did not have an answer. That is the end of chapter 6. As you can see, we're into chapter 7. I know you're probably thinking, well, this is, it's a very sad story. It is a true story, and it's actually a wonderful little story. It shows definitely the devotion of dogs to their owners, for any of you that are dog lovers like myself. And it truly is a wonderful story. And I do hope that you all, if you have access to, it's either on Netflix or Amazon. I'll have to check. I have a DVD copy. It's what I usually show in my classroom when we do the compare and contrast. After we read the story aloud, then we do the activities. I put some activities into Google Classroom. We're already up there for you today. They're basically covering chapters 1 through 4. I just read 5 and 6. So the ones that you'll see on Google Classroom again are only for chapters 1 to 4. But we do the novel and we also watch the movie. And every year it really touches my students. And I've seen it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen the movie and read the book. And each time it still touches me. It never gets old. That's the one thing. That's the power of a novel. And I know most of you and most kids nowadays especially are so, video games, that's your thing, and TV, and everything's digital. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's something about a book, holding a book in your hand, reading it, where you have no pictures, you just have imagery that brings the novel to life. There's something that's so special about that, and you can get lost in a novel. You really can. And I hope all of you will continue to keep reading, keep staying alert with your math, I'm also going to be doing probably a few science videos. I thought about some of the experiments that I had planned that we never got to, and so I would probably like to do some of those, and maybe I could show them to you on this channel. You need to let me know if you want to do that. I've had a few people contact me on the videos and what they're watching, and I appreciate that. I think I have 3 videos up so far. This will be day 3, though, of this. I have 2 videos of a reading, and one is just some whiteboard drawings that I did that I knew you guys would enjoy. My whiteboard this year, I didn't get to draw as many. A lot of them are from last year and this year, because my one whiteboard that I used to do the drawings on is no longer usable. So I'm going to see, it'd be nice if I could get that fixed this summer so I could start doing the drawings on there so then I teach on my other board. All right, guys, I'm going to go and let you go. So we just finished chapter 6 of Hachiko Waits, and I will probably read 7 and 8 tomorrow, but I might skip tomorrow. I will send a message on Remind to let your folks know, The reason I might skip tomorrow is I don't want us to get too ahead of ourselves, because I already have assignments that I put on Google Classroom for chapters 1 to 4. And I'll end up putting 5 and 6 up. I don't want to have so many that you just become overwhelmed. I want you to give you time to complete those assignments, and then we'll continue the story. So I will let you know. I might go and film tomorrow. I haven't decided yet. So once again, I miss you guys. I love you. And I thought I would film during the day. It's a little bit brighter. I've been filming in the evening, but I have to film in my bedroom because it's much more quiet than downstairs. It's kind of loud. So I love you guys, and I didn't bring any of my pets on to show you today. I wanted us to focus on the story. So maybe next time. All right, guys. Bye.